The Vivo X100 Pro and X100 Ultra have been the best camera smartphones I've tested this year, and they also boast solid performance, so the new X200 series has a lot to live up to. Thankfully, both the X200 and X200 Pro have entered into the global markets, and I have both of them here with me today. In their familiar looking boxes, you'll find the devices themselves, clear silicon cases, 8.5 amp charging cables, and 90-watt charging bricks. Both phones have already started their global rollout, with the X200 costing around $780 for the 256 gig variant and around $850 for the 512 gig. The X200 Pro costs around $1,120 and only comes with a 512 gig option. These are only slight price bumps when compared to their predecessors' launch prices. The X200 series offer quite a few upgrades this year, but their two main pillars are performance and camera. So let's start with those and then we'll get to the rest. Both devices are powered by MediaTek's latest Dimensity 9400 CPU, and they have stuck with the same all-big core design, but this time those cores sit on a 3nm TSMC process node. Like last year, there are no efficiency cores here. There's one super performance core clocked at 3.63 GHz, 3 prime cores at 3.3 GHz, and 4 performance cores at 2.4 GHz. That's quite a jump up from the Dimensity 9300 clock speeds. There's also a new integrated Immortalis G925 12-core GPU running at 1.612 GHz, which sees a 41% performance improvement over last year's. This new chip is paired alongside up to 16 gigs of LPDDR5X RAM and up to 512 gigs of UFS 4.0 storage. So of course, benchmark scores are quite a bit higher than the previous Dimensity chipset, but even though both devices are using the same CPU, their scores are a bit inconsistent. Unfortunately, they scored lower than the Snapdragon 8 Elite CPU in pretty much every benchmark except for 3D Mark Solar Bay, which means MediaTek's latest chip pulls ahead in terms of ray tracing performance. So benchmark scores have definitely improved, but unfortunately they fall short of Qualcomm's latest flagship chipset. But benchmark scores aren't everything, so let's see how these guys stack up in terms of gaming. There are a handful of useful gaming features on both devices, including boost performance mode for max performance. The X200 Pro offers high and ultra high quality super resolutions, while the X200 only offers high. This doesn't really matter though, since ultra high isn't much better than high and for some reason locks the frame rate at 30 FPS, which wasn't the case for the iQOO13 that I recently reviewed and makes use of the same gaming features. High quality does, however, offer a noticeable difference over original, but only a few games benefit from this feature. I've only found it in Genshin Impact and Call of Duty Mobile. Another useful feature is game frame interpolation, which is once again only available on the Pro model, and it's limited to just a few games. It can boost FPS up to 90 frames in Genshin, but it's not native frame rate. Interpolation generates new frames between existing ones to create a smoother motion. This is also a feature seen in the iQOO13 running the Snapdragon 8 Elite chip, and that could interpolate frame rate better and up to 144 frames per second. Before we dive into average FPS results, it's worth mentioning that both phones are equipped with vapor chamber cooling systems, and they felt quite a bit cooler than phones with last gen chips and even the new Qualcomm chip. It's also worth mentioning that they both offer IR blasters, Bluetooth 5.4, NFC, Wi-Fi 7, dual SIM 5G with eSIM support, flagship level vibration motors and dual speakers, but only the X200 Pro has a USB 3.2 Type-C port. The standard X200 is limited to USB 2.0 speeds, and neither of them support charge bypass. Back to gaming. I played Genshin Impact on both devices for a while, set them to the same max graphics and max FPS settings, but Genshin is capped at 60 FPS. I also enabled the high quality super resolution feature on both devices, and they both averaged around 60 FPS the entire time playing, which isn't exactly surprising since previous generation chipsets had no issues running this game at the same frame rate, but the game was more stable overall. We then tested out Call of Duty Mobile using high quality super resolution, and they both had no issues pushing the max 120 frame rate of this game, which again is something that last gen chips could do as well. After that, we moved on to Call of Duty Warzone Mobile, which is a lot more demanding as its graphics are actually ported from consoles. I did notice though that the X200 Pro performed slightly better than the X200 here, averaging 111 FPS as opposed to 106. I did max out all in-game settings including uncapped FPS and maximum field of view, but for some strange reason the highest visual quality presets is high. The Snapdragon 8 Elite averaged around 100 FPS on high, so the new Dimensity 9400 is certainly a bit better here, and it felt a lot smoother too. The average FPS we got on last year's chips was around 75 FPS, so you'll be getting an extra 30 frames from the new chips. And lastly, we tested out Withering Waves, which only recently released and is already the benchmark for mobile gaming. We of course maxed out all of its in-game settings, but once again this game is capped at 60 FPS. Both the X200 and X200 Pro averaged exactly 59.4 FPS, which is oddly enough the exact same FPS we received when testing out the Snapdragon 8 Elite powered iQOO 13. Last gen CPUs only managed around 40 frames per second on the same settings, so the latest chips do offer a decent boost in performance. So the first main pillar, performance, has definitely seen some welcomed improvements this year, but now it's time to get to that second main pillar, cameras, and both of them have seen some changes this year. They both house the same 32 megapixel ISOCELL KD1 selfie cameras, which have the same f2.0 aperture as last year's, but there are slightly different sensors and their focal lengths differ too, coming in at 23mm instead of last year's wider 20mm field of view. So there is no wide selfie option like we saw last year, but images seem to come out looking more detailed, so there's definitely an improvement here. For some reason, the X200 crops into 24mm when set to portrait mode, while the Pro sticks to 23mm. However, the X200 Pro seems to offer better edge detection and more natural background blur. At night, with night mode enabled, Vivo seems to continue to smooth my face just like last year, even with beauty mode disabled. And just like with their predecessors, the image gets sharper when enabling portrait mode, though I still favor the X200 Pro here, even with the flash enabled.
What's up guys, this is TechNick recording a 4K 60 FPS selfie video on the brand new Vivo X200 and X200 Pro. Though the X200 Pro takes things a step further by adding in Dolby Vision video. Let me know your thoughts of their video and their microphone quality.
4K 60 FPS selfie video is great, right out of the box, unlike last year's which came later with a software update. But unfortunately, selfie portrait video is still limited to 1080p resolution. Taking 4K selfie video at night leaves both devices with a bit too much noise grain for my liking, but this isn't any different with other flagships at night. And while selfie portrait video eliminates quite a bit of grain at night, it's not quite as bright as regular selfie video. So selfies have certainly improved, but it would have been nice to have seen the X200 Pro adopt the impressive 50 megapixel selfie sensor we saw on the X100 Ultra. Vivo's Zeiss partnership still stands, however, which offers different color styles on any of the rear cameras. There's Vivid, which makes colors pop, Textured, which underexposes to enhance detail, and Zeiss Natural, which strikes a nice balance and gives a more accurate representation of the scene, so that's what we'll be sticking to. When taking portrait photos with their mains, the X200 Pro offers better dynamic range and depth, but I tend to favor the standard X200 in terms of exposure. Taking portraits with their periscopes once again leaves the X200 more exposed, but the X200 Pro offers seriously good detail and depth here, giving it more of a DSLR level portrait. The X200 has 3 times optical zoom, but for some strange reason, its lowest periscope zoom range in portrait mode is 3.7 times, I guess to match that of the Pro. When recording video with their mains, it's worth pointing out that only the X200 Pro offers Dolby Vision as well as 8K video. The X200 doesn't offer these modes at all. The X200 Pro's Dolby Vision video works on all of its sensors, even the selfie, but 8K video is limited to just the main camera. The standard X200 does have portrait video, but it's limited to 1080p resolution, while the X200 Pro, just like last year, offers it in 4K resolution, and it looks significantly better than the non-Pro model. The main reason for this is because only the X200 Pro houses the Vivo V3 Plus imaging chip, which is the same we saw on the X100 Ultra, and my goodness, does periscope portrait video look incredible. But unfortunately, none of them offer the upgraded ultra-wide sensor we see in the X100 Ultra. Instead, both of them stick to the exact same ultra-wide sensors we saw in last year's models. That being a 1 in 2.76 inch sized 50 megapixel ISOCELL J1 sensor with an f2.0 aperture and autofocus. They also both rely on the same 15mm focal length as last year's for a 119 degree field of view. But the J1 sensor is still a a very capable ultra-wide camera, and it shows when taking a super macro photo, though I must say I kinda prefer the X200 shot here. They both take identical native 50 megapixel shots here, but the X200 seems to be a bit more saturated, and while it's a similar case when both are binned down, the X200 Pro tends to handle detail a bit better, though it's much of a muchness when taking an ultra-wide photo at night. And they both offer 4K 60fps ultra-wide video too, and they're pretty much the same, as they should be considering they're using the exact same sensor. Recording ultra-wide video at night also looks the same, and neither are perfect, but most ultra-wide cameras struggle with video at night anyway. It's good to see barely any grain here, even though both of them drop their frame rate to brighten up video. While their ultra-wides haven't changed, they're still solid sensors, but improvements start to roll in when we get to their main cameras. The X200 gets upgraded to a 50 megapixel IMX921 sensor, which has replaced last year's IMX920. It still has OIS, an aperture of f1.57, but its sensor size is actually smaller. The X200 Pro also has a smaller sensor size at 1 in 1.28 inches as opposed to last year's 1-inch type sensor, but it's a newer 50 megapixel LYT818 sensor, which Sony insists is on par with a 1-inch sensor and possibly even better at times. That's likely because it has a wider aperture at f1.57 and now offers SEPA 4.5 level OIS. Both of them pack in laser autofocusing systems, which again helps out with super macro photos, which yes, you can also do with their mains, but again I tend to favor the standard X200 shot here. The X200 Pro does have the better sensor though, so it was no surprise to see it take a better native photo. And it's the same case when binning them down. The X200 Pro just offers more overall detail, but you really have to nitpick to notice. The Pro also offers more natural detail when zooming in by 2 times with its main camera. The standard X200 is still very good, but it uses sharpening to push detail. However, differences are slightly more noticeable at night, with the X200 Pro offering better light noise handling, color accuracy, and exposure, which is of course the same case when it comes to 2 times hybrid zoom. But again, you really have to nitpick. Supermoon mode is now automatic when in night mode, which is now called landscape mode, and while supermoon mode is fun to play around with, it's just better used with their telephoto cameras, which we'll get to later. Astro mode is still around, which is a nice little feature, but again the X200 Pro tends to handle light noise better, and this goes hand in hand with AR Planetarium. Both of these modes are limited to their main cameras. Both of their action video modes have been upgraded to 2.8K 60fps video, just like we saw with the X100 Ultra, but the X200 only offers it with its main, and the X200 Pro only offers it with its main and periscope, whereas the X100 Ultra could use this mode for its ultra-wide camera too. Another feature brought over from the X100 Ultra is 4K 120fps video for the X200 Pro, while the regular X200 lacks this mode. The Pro can use it with its main camera and its periscope, which means the Pro also gets a 4K 120fps slow motion video option, just like we saw with the X100 Ultra, which is naturally a lot more detailed than the standard X200, which limits slow-mo to 1080p resolution. Both of them also have 1080p 240fps slow motion, but 240fps is the highest frame rate on both devices. And when it comes to night video recording with their main cameras, the X200 Pro certainly proves that it has the better sensor here. But to be honest, most people won't really notice much of a difference between these two main cameras, especially when they're not shown side by side. I do feel, however, that the X100 Ultra's 1-inch type main sensor is better than the main sensor found inside the X200 Pro, but I guess we'll have to wait and see what happens with the X200 Ultra. The most important camera differences between the X200 series devices no doubt lies in their periscope sensors, because while the standard X200 does get an upgraded 3x zoom 50 megapixel IMX882 periscope sensor, the X200 Pro gets the exact same periscope we saw on the X100 Ultra, that being a massive 1 in 1.4 inch sized 200 megapixel ISOCELL HP9 sensor with SEPA 4.5 level OIS, an f2.67 aperture, and an 85mm focal length for 3.7 times optical zoom, making it the largest zoom camera sensor in the global market. But there is one small difference between the X100 Ultra and X200 Pro's periscope sensor. The Ultra's sits on a floating mechanism, whereas the Pro's doesn't, so its minimum focusing distance isn't quite as impressive when it comes to macro photography. But But we're talking 1 or 2 centimeter differences here, so you probably won't notice, and the X100 Ultra is still a China exclusive, so this is the best you'll get in the global market. But the Ultra can reach a 30 times macro zoom, whereas the X200 Pro's caps out at 20 times, which is the same as the standard X200. The Pro is slightly more detailed in some parts of this image when compared to the X200, but to be very honest, I prefer the macro shots taken on the regular X200. There's just more in focus. Of course, the X200 Pro can also take native 200 megapixel shots, but there's also a 50 megapixel mode, just like with the non-Pro. And while the X200 Pro does pick up more background detail, its larger sensor size leaves the foreground out of focus. The X200 does have a wider focal point, but the Pro is no doubt the better sensor, especially when looking into the distance, and it becomes more noticeable when zooming them both in by 10 times. At 60 times, the Pro continues to offer more detail, and the same can be said at their max 100 times zoom ranges. But to be honest, I have seen better long zoom range images. The Pro is also slightly better at night, but I'm rather impressed with the standard X200 as well. Though at 10 times zoom, the Pro packs in cleaner detail and handles light noise better. It's not even a competition at 60 times zoom. But the differences aren't as apparent at 100 times zoom range. It's worth mentioning though that the Pro was a lot easier to take high zoom photos. The standard X200 would sometimes take the snap and the results would be off by a meter or two, so this photo took me ages on the standard X200. Oddly enough, the X200 seems to take better snaps of the moon when using optical zoom, and their color accuracy is very different at 100 times. The Pro also takes slightly, but I mean slightly more detailed 4K periscope video, but the Pro is the only one which can shoot periscope video at 120 frames per second. At night, the regular X200 reverted to its main camera, no matter what I tried. So naturally, the X200 Pro was filled with more detailed, less grain, and handled light noise better. They honestly take equally as good photos and videos across all of their cameras. Yes, the Pro was better at times, but you'd really have to nitpick. But if you do go with the X200 Pro, you'll definitely be getting more features and modes, and of course, you'll also be getting the world's largest periscope sensor found in a phone. To keep you gaming and taking photos and videos all day, both models offer larger batteries. The X200 has a larger 5800 mAh battery, while the X200 Pro has a massive 6000 mAh cell. Unfortunately, both of their wide charging speeds have dropped down to 90 watts in order to prioritize energy density. The X200 Pro, once again, is the only device here that offers wireless charging, but it's dropped down to 30 watts as opposed to last year's, but it does still have reverse wireless charging. The X200 comes in 4 different colors: green, blue, white, and black, while the X200 Pro comes in just 3 colors: titanium, blue, and black. Keep in mind that the Titanium Pro is not actually made from titanium, it's just the color name. The now flat frames of both models are made from aluminum, though the Pro model has brushed side rails. Vivo have stuck to a similar design language with large circular camera modules, though of course the Pro's module is larger, and the flash still remains on the device's backplates tucked away in the corner. The backplates themselves are made from glass, but the black versions of both models use glass fiber. Because of this, the black colorways are slightly thinner and lighter, and of course all variants of the non-Pro are thinner and lighter than the Pro. Both of them now offer an IP68 and IP69 certification, meaning they can still be submerged in water 1.5 meters deep for 30 minutes, but can now also withstand high pressure water jets. The X200's display is protected by Scott Sensation Alpha, and the Pro is protected by armor glass, which should be a bit stronger and more scratch resistant. And to top things off, the X200 Pro now uses a 3D ultrasonic in-display fingerprint sensor, which is more accurate and a lot faster as it uses sound waves instead of light. The X100 and X100 Pro of last year both used optical sensors, which is the same case with the non-Pro X200. Both of their displays are similar in terms of features, but they are both now using a newer VM8 light-emitting material, which has replaced last year's VM7 material. The non-Pro X200, though, now has a smaller screen size, while the X200 Pro retains the same sized panel. So the X200 now has a smaller 6.67-inch AMOLED screen, while the X200 Pro sticks to a 6.78 AMOLED display, which is the same size as last year's X100 and and X100 Pro. I guess it makes sense to have a slightly smaller model available in the global market. They both have the same screen resolutions as their predecessors, but since the X200 has a smaller screen, it has a higher number of pixels per inch. The standard X200 unfortunately no longer uses LTPO technology like the X100 did, so it sticks to a fixed 120Hz refresh rate, while the X200 Pro actually gets an LTPO upgrade, which now allows it to refresh between 0.1 and 120Hz. Both of them still offer two 160Hz PWM dimming, just like last year's, but both of their screens have now gotten a lot brighter with 4500 nits of peak brightness as opposed to last year's 3000 nits. They both have very thin bezels, though the Pros are a bit slimmer, and while they both have quad curve displays, the curves are a lot, and I mean a lot more subtle. They're practically flat, but still offer that premium look and feel more comfortable than a completely flat panel. The X200 series ships with FunTouch OS 15 out the box, which is skinned over Android 15. That's great news considering many other flagships out there are still stuck on Android 14. Both will be receiving 4 years of major software updates and 5 years of security updates. And of course they both pack in all of Google's goodies, as these are the global variants. This includes Google Discover to the left of the home screen, Gemini and Gemini Live, Circle to search, and AI image editing. Overall, I'm pretty happy with the UI, as it now looks a lot cleaner than the previous FunTouch software, while still including loads of customization options, and now finally adds in large folders, which puts the software more in line with other flagships. So to sum things up, the X200 Pro is more expensive for a few reasons. It has USB 3.2 speeds, offers more gaming features, more camera features and modes, includes the new V3 Plus imaging chip, has a better main and periscope camera, has a larger battery and includes wireless charging, offers stronger glass protection, packs in an ultrasonic fingerprint sensor, and has a better and bigger display. And while the non-Pro X200 has a smaller display and lacks LTPO tech, it's just as good and packs in more pixels per inch. Its battery isn't much smaller, and in all honesty, the camera system is almost as good as its bigger brother. I guess in terms of price, you'd be getting more bang for buck with the standard X200, but if you want it all without any compromise, then of course the X200 Pro is the better phone here. Either way, both of them offer some very good upgrades over their predecessors, so let me know your thoughts on which you prefer in the comment section down below. As always, this is TechNick, and I'll catch you in the next one.